take a look at your grades on Brightspace. If you have any questions about the grades, if you want to discuss hypotheticals about anything, or I don't know, goals or targets, just let me know. I'm happy to kind of go over anything and answer any questions. Okay? All right, so got to finish up a little bit of stuff we didn't get to last time. Okay. So last class we were talking about acculturation. We were talking about general policy, Roman policy of tolerance and inclusion. We talked about, again, how this ideal didn't always hold up. So again, looking at the conflicts in Judea, the Jewish revolts, and then leading to Roman retribution, right? Where the Romans start to actively try to suppress the practice of Judaism and the Jewish identity, right? They want to kind of erase the remnants of the old national state. Okay, so that's what we talked about in our last class. Okay, so moving on, rise of Christianity. So the context for the rise of Christianity, again, is this debate, strife, uncertainty in Judea, right? Remember, there was this big kind of, there was lots of factions, lots of division in Judea. A big question that everyone was engaging with was, well, what does it mean to be Jewish, as now under kind of a foreign power, now under the authority of the Roman Empire, right? How has Judaism evolved as the world has evolved, right? So there's lots of different people asking these questions. Jesus of Nazareth, right, is going to be one of, or the leader of, or the focus of, one of these factions, essentially, right? Again, he leads a movement that begins essentially as a reform movement within Judaism, right? Advocating kind of a change of approach in one's kind of religious view and practices. Around the year 30 CE, he will be executed under the authority of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, right? So if you remember, when we talked about provincial governors, they were tasked with kind of keeping the peace, right? They were responsible for maintaining civil order and had the powers of life and death, and could execute anyone deemed a threat to Roman authority, right? So the charges leveled against Jesus were those of sedition and rebellion. Again, the Romans took a very expansive view to kind of what constitutes sedition, treason, or rebellion, right? So basically anything that was rocking the boat, anything that was disturbing public order, right? This could constitute treason, right? So this was the justification for executing Jesus of Nazareth, right? It was basically disturbing the order. This was essentially diminishing Rome. This was treason. As probably most people know, right, Jesus was executed by crucifixion, basically being hung on a cross until death. This was actually a very, very common form of punishment that the Romans used. So it was a very painful way of executing someone and a very public way of executing someone. And so the Romans frequently used crucifixion as a public punishment to make a message, a way of kind of reestablishing their authority, especially over kind of lower status people who sought to kind of disturb the public order or the established order, right? So for example, we talked about Spartacus and the rebellion of enslaved persons, right? Those who were captured and not killed in battle were crucified, right? Again, public statement, these were enslaved persons who had risen up, who had violated or went against the established order, and thus were to be punished publicly. All right, Nicolette.
Is it true that they did line the roads to Rome with these victims?
After Spartacus, at least that's what one of the accounts says. So probably, I mean, we don't know if it's 100% accurate, but it's the type of thing that, Pompey probably would have done. So yeah. Okay. Briar, did you have a question, or did I see a hand?
Approximately how many other self-proclaimed messiahs were there in Judea at this time?
It's hard to say. I mean, there are definitely, I mean, just because we don't have records that survive, but like, for example, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure, like, for example, like one example is that there's talk of kind of King Herod possibly being the Messiah, or his grandson, right, Herod Agrippa, are ones that survive. And there's others kind of oblique references to it too. So Josephus kind of mentions some of the other movements, but I don't know how many maybe actually claim the title Messiah. But there are kind of different movements that are kind of organized around a messianic figure, if not the Messiah.
Professor, are you aware of Rabbi Hillel?
A little bit.
Very, very similar.
Oh, of Messiah? Yeah. So, yeah, so I mean, like I said, there was, basically the point being is that there wasn't a unified kind of Jewish identity or even kind of approach to the Jewish religion at the time in Judea, right? That there were different interpretations, different priorities, different ways of going about it, and Jesus and his followers were kind of one group among several. So going back to Jesus, right, charges against him, crucifixion. Again, the other way that we see this, in the Christian tradition, right, that he wasn't executed or crucified by himself. There were two others, the quote-unquote two thieves, which is not, again, the perhaps most accurate English translation. So the word is lestai that gets used, which again technically means thief, but not like someone who breaks into your house. Thief or pickpockets you, but like bandits or rebels, the word is used for, right? Brigands. So like lestai would be kind of our equivalent, might be like pirates, or Robin Hood would be a lestai, right? But again, from the Roman perspective, right, that these two are kind of, almost one and the same, right? People who live outside of society, who take action against the established kind of order, established authority, Roman authority, for their own advantage, right? So again, the thieves themselves, more than just robbers, right? Bandits, rebels, brigands, that kind of idea speaks to this idea of sedition and rebellion. Okay, any questions here?
Did the Romans view early Christianity as extremist, or?
Okay, so the answer is yes, in the sense that, given the kind of general tolerance that we talked about earlier, the Romans viewed them as a threat and took action against them, but not necessarily unique extremists, in the sense that the Romans kind of saw extremists anywhere, to that kind of thing. Like, they were not, despite the kind of attitude towards toleration, which is also true, right? They didn't hesitate to basically execute people that they saw as being threats to the kind of the social order. So it's kind of like, I don't know if extremist is the right word, right? But it's kind of they saw them as problematic and dangerous. At times, although we'll come back to that in a second.
And would the Romans in Rome know about early Christianity, or just
How early?
I guess around the time of Jesus Christ
No.
died.
So they know about Judea, right? But from their perspective, and arguably from the early followers of Jesus too, right? They are kind of one faction among several in Judea, right? That the authorities, both Roman and Judean authorities, view them as a bit of a fringe faction. Again, they're not alone with that designation, so there are many others that get talked about in kind of these fringe, as these kind of non-mainstream terms as well too. So Roman authorities wouldn't have distinguished them from Judaism, but may have distinguished them from kind of mainstream Jewish practices, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So at this time, the Romans, although this will change, right? The Romans are okay with what we might think of as being more mainstream practices at the time. They were concerned about more fringe elements because the fringe elements, from the Roman perspective, were disturbing the public order. And part of the way that they were disturbing the public order is that they were challenging kind of the mainstream way of doing things. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. Maybe it'll kind of add some more context to it. All right. So let's move on here. So a major figure in the rise of Christianity, again, as a distinct religious movement, something that is distinct from Judaism, is going to be Paul of Tarsus, or in the Christian tradition, St. Paul, right? So Tarsus is a city in Asia Minor. Paul's family, like Elias Aristides, who gave the speech to Rome, right, was a member of this kind of municipal elite, right? That he and his family members were Roman citizens themselves, and that's going to be an important element if you know the story of Paul, right? And also receives, again, a very kind of Hellenistic Greek education. Was there a question that I see, or no? Okay, so going to Kieran's point, right? So again, he is a member of the elite, of the kind of mainstream element, even though he's not in Judea, right? In Asia Minor, where there's also, again, a substantial kind of Jewish population, right? And again, is taking action against groups that are, again, viewed as damaging to the established order, not just the established Roman order, but the established Jewish order, right? So subversive or radical groups. This is going to bring him into conflict with the followers of Jesus. But again, right, Paul undergoes again, according to Christian tradition, a religious experience, right? A kind of a formative experience that's going to shift his view. He becomes kind of the leading Christian theologian at the time, and is author of the earliest Christian texts that we have. So in terms of writing date, right, when they were written, the earliest texts that we have were written by Paul, right? And these were letters written to communities of Christians in areas throughout the Roman Empire. Okay, so it's not until about 100 CE that we see Christians named as kind of a distinct group in the sources. Like even Paul doesn't really use the name Christians to the same degree as a group that is distinct from Jews, right? About 100, both in the Christian tradition with the Acts of the Apostles, if you're familiar with that, or in Roman authors such as Pliny, Tacitus, Suetonius, we start to see groups named as Christians who are viewed as being distinct or different than the Jewish people. Okay? Christians are going to undergo sporadic suppression and persecution under Roman authorities. So what do we mean by sporadic? It's going to be kind of up and down. It's not going to be systemic, that it's happening all across the Roman Empire, and it's not always in effect, right? But there's basically going to be periods of intense persecution, oftentimes, but not always, in response to, or at least that we can tell, in response to other public issues, right? The most famous one is the Great Fire that takes place at Rome.
So would many of these Christians actually migrate to the east, like Parthia?
Don't know. In terms of migrating, so are there going to be essentially traveling to the east for evangelical purposes? Yes. Right. So that people are traveling to the east to basically spread Christianity. In terms of migration to escape persecution, I don't know, and I don't think we have enough. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. All right. So let's talk about Pliny's letter. So again, one of the earliest sources that we have here is the letter written by Pliny when he's governor of Bithynia in Asia Minor to Trajan, the emperor in Rome, right? Again, addressing the situation of Christians. This was PS 38, which we were supposed to talk about last week. I'm just going to look at this something really quickly, right? So Pliny writes to Trajan, "It is my practice, my lord, to refer to you all matters concerning which I am in doubt. Whenever I have questions, I ask you. For who can give better guidance to my hesitation or inform my ignorance? I have never participated in trials of Christians." Okay? So again, speaking to trials, persecutions being a thing, Pliny says, "I've never participated. I therefore do not know what offenses it is the practice to punish or investigate, and to what extent." Right? So basically, what am I looking for? Like, what's a crime, and how harshly do I punish it? And I have not been a little hesitant as to whether there should be any distinction on account of age or no difference between the very young and the more mature, whether pardon is to be granted for repentance, or if a man has once been a Christian, it does him no good to have ceased to be one, right? So in other words, is it okay if someone says, yeah, I used to be a Christian, but I'm not anymore? Do you let him off the hook? Or if he was ever a Christian, are you punishing him for it, even if he no longer is, right? So moving on to the next paragraph, he says, meanwhile, in the case of those who are denounced to me as Christians, what does it mean to be denounced as a Christian? What does it mean denounced? What?
It means like to force upon, I would assume, or like yeah, like to be like ousted maybe.
We're getting closer. Ousted's kind of close.
It's like the removal of yourself from the religion.
Not removal.
Oh, I guess like a condemnation of their following of Christianity
By who?
by Romans.
Could be Romans. Could be someone else, right?
Could it be rejected?
Could be what?
It's like, sorry, I'm saying, could it be rejected?
Not so much rejected. So if someone's denounced, someone else has basically accused them of being Christian. So what he's saying is that there are people, right, that are basically going to the governor or going to a magistrate and saying, that guy's a Christian. That woman's a Christian. Right? So they've essentially been outed, so to speak. They've been accused of being Christians. This is what he means by denounced. Yeah. Anthony.
So, can this be tied into the Pliny's last, what do you call it, the last passage we talked about?
Yeah.
Because they were kind of like factions of sorts.
Or at least there's a fear of
Factions,
factions, right? Why doesn't Trajan want the firefighters? Who can be against firefighters? Who has a problem with firefighters? Well, Trajan does. Why?
Factions.
Factions.
Because they created a small group, and small groups tend to cause an uproar.
Right? He calls them secret societies, right? And again, you got to be worried about secret societies, right? Because who knows what they're doing, or causing an uproar, or disturbing the peace, right? So again, the persecution of Christians, very much in line with this, right? That they represent a secret society of sorts. Brian?
There's also, and to tie out to that, there's also the great fear of legitimizing and these groups.
I mean, I guess so. In a way, like the concerns are less dogmatic. Like the Romans don't really care about the specifics of Christian belief or whether their belief controverts something else. They care about the whole kind of, they're a group, they're secretive, they're disturbing the peace, right? So it's much more of a practical concern than a, like either a theological or a dogmatic concern. All right, so he says, in the case of those who are denounced to me as Christians, I have observed the following procedure. So again, this is what he's done as governor to those who are accused of being Christian. I interrogated these as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I ordered executed. For I had no doubt that, whatever the nature of their creed, stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy surely deserve to be punished. Right? So what's he saying here?
People who were accused of being Christians, they were executed.
Yes, but he does a step first, or two steps first, I guess. Gabrielle.
Probably like give them like a few chances to like reject their Christianity.
Right. So this is when he says those who confessed, I interrogated them a second time. I interrogated them a third time. Essentially, what he's applying, this will get mentioned later, right, is giving them an opportunity to basically reject Christianity, right? Because we see this in his, why is it that he orders, that he justifies to the emperor that he has executed these people? Like, why does he say they are worthy of execution? Nicolette?
Because they persisted even after he threatened them with punishment.
And why is that a problem?
Because that means they're too loyal to their beliefs.
And therefore, like, what's the problem? Because again, it's like,
They can be influenced, or they're too influenced by the secret society they created.
A little bit of that, right? But he says, I had no doubt that whatever the nature of their creed, whatever they believed, right? Stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy surely deserve to be punished. What's the problem?
I guess that Christians are like a threat to the status quo and stability in Rome
Why?
because they may cause a revolt like the Jews.
I mean, he doesn't quite go that far, though. So, I mean, yes, I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's not quite what he says here. What's the problem with the Christians, according to Pliny?
That they're too stubborn and they're not flexible.
What's the problem? So why is that a problem?
I would say it's a problem for them only because they're supposed to be the most stubborn, aren't they?
I mean, I don't know if they would say it that way, but I mean, but yes, right? I mean, you're supposed to kind of follow the Roman way of doing things, right? John,
Because they're stubborn, it's hard to control them.
right? Why is it hard to control them?
Because they're rigid, they have
Right.
their dogma and
And if you tell them to do something,
they're not gonna do it.
if they don't want to do it,
They'll do the opposite.
right? So again, going back to the Christianity is again deemed problematic. I'm saying don't be Christian. They do it anyway. I say don't do Christian. They do it anyway. Don't be Christian. It's dangerous. It's harming us. They do it anyway. So Pliny's justification is, look, it doesn't matter what they believe. It's the fact that they are stubbornly, basically refusing to listen to the rules that leads to them being executed. Because we can't have people stubbornly listening to the rules because, again, this leads to a loss of power. Yeah, right?
Well, I think I'm pretty sure everyone has already covered it. Because I was going to say the same thing. And I had to say that, sorry, because I was going to say the same thing. And that from his perspective, that they saw the Christians as stubborn and unreasonably determined to follow their way of life instead of the Roman way of
Right.
life.
So it's being stubborn and basically following or doing things that the Romans say don't do, right? And the Romans are like, look, this is problematic. Whatever they believe, the fact that we tell them to do something and they say no, that's a problem, right? So again, it's not so much, this is kind of my point, it's not so much theology, he's like the fact that we tell them something and they don't listen, all right? Now again, the Christian would say, oh, it's theology. But from the Roman perspective, right, it's, this willingness to kind of play ball, I guess, right? So he goes on and describes all the procedures and everything, which I'm going to kind of skip over because we have to move on to other stuff, right? I want to talk about Trajan's response, right? So Trajan responds to Pliny on page 3. You observe the proper procedure, my dear Pliny, in sifting the cases of those who had been denounced to you as Christians. For it is not possible to lay down any general rule to serve as a kind of fixed standard. They are not to be sought out. So what is Trajan telling Pliny first?
Don't seek them,
Who's the them?
the Christians.
So don't go looking for Christians, right? So he's basically kind of a don't ask, don't tell thing, right? Don't go looking for Christians, right? If they are denounced, so again, if someone accuses them and proved guilty, they are to be punished then, with this reservation, that whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves it, that is by worshiping our gods, even though he was under suspicion in the past, shall obtain pardon through repentance. But anonymously posted accusations ought to have no place in any prosecution, for this is both a dangerous kind of precedent and out of keeping with the spirit of our age. Kieran.
I guess he was trying to prevent like a Red Scare kind of,
Okay, why do you think he was?
because people would take advantage of it. Let's say their neighbors are Bible and
And what's the problem with that?
they can claim they're a Christian and they can be killed.
But if you're a Roman emperor, why do you care about that? Why do you care if someone
Because
gets neighbor killed?
It's going to lead to instability.
There you go, right? It's about maintaining the stability. And so he's like, look, one, don't go look. Like if you don't notice that someone's a Christian, then no problems, right? They're not creating problems if no one sees it. If they denounce it, okay, then follow procedure. If they're guilty, give them chances, right? But then Trajan still signs off on it, and if they still persist, he's like, okay, then, punishment, execution. So he's still on board with the execution, right? But then he's like, but no anonymous complaint, kind of complaints, right? Again, trying to limit the instability, right? So really, you only need to take action if there's some sort of, publicity going on, right? Because the publicity is going to lead to disorder, right? So this very much is going to encapsulate kind of the Roman attitude towards Christianity, right? It's even with the sporadic persecution, more often than not, it's going to be don't ask, don't tell, right? That the Romans aren't going to go looking for Christians largely because that oftentimes will create more trouble than it's worth for them. So not out of any necessary kindness, more out of expediency. Okay, other questions or thoughts? Kieran.
So would you say that the Romans viewed the Christians as a threat, like to the Levant and mainly the Middle East, compared to as more of a threat to the Roman state?
No, at this point, the Roman state is everything, right? So Pliny's in Asia Minor, in Bithynia. All of this is now Rome. And there's Christians all throughout the East at this point. So I don't think there's concern at this point about one area more than another. Maybe a little bit more concern with the Levant because, again, that's still kind of the center of even with the spread of Christianity, it's still the center of Jewish kind of rebelliousness, right? We're going to get the second rebellion coming about 20 years later. But there's really kind of concern everywhere. All right, so this brings us to the Severan dynasty. So after a year of kind of multiple people claiming to be emperor, the so-called Year of the Five Emperors we talked about a long time ago, we get the rise of Septimius Severus, who's going to rule for about 20 years, the end of the 2nd century, right? Once again, a member of the provincial elite. So he was a Roman citizen, right? An elite Roman, but was from North Africa. And one thing that we start to see, right, kind of at the end of the 2nd century, is that kind of Roman power and influence, which had before been largely located in Italy, right? Remember the debate about letting in the Gauls, right? The focus is on Italy. Increasingly, we start to see more and more power located in the provinces itself, outside of Italy, right? So here again, someone from North Africa, right? So he had held various civil appointments in Rome. He's serving as governor of Pannonia, which is say like modern Bulgaria, Balkans, parts of Greece, right? The Year of the Five Emperors, so there's lots of people who are claiming to be emperor. His army is going to acclaim him emperor. He's going to go fight, and is going to win. And part of his mission as emperor is that he is going to be responsible for weakening the senatorial elite. So basically trying to increase the power of the emperor, which was already pretty high, at the expense of the other senators. All right. Has anyone seen Gladiator 2? There's a couple people seen Gladiator 2. Anyone want to guess who's in the picture here? We have Septimius Severus. We have his wife, who I can't remember her name. Julia Domna. Who else do we have in the picture? Yes?
Is that Commodus?
Not Commodus, but another C.
Caracalla.
The Emperor Caracalla. And who's the person who's got his face scratched out here?
Yeah.
The Emperor, or his brother Geta, right? This gets referenced in Gladiator 2, right? With the conflict between Caracalla and Geta, right? Geta, they're two brothers. They're going to be co-emperors at first. They come into conflict. Geta gets killed. Caracalla is going to be the sole emperor. So this was something that was made earlier. It was a picture of the family. After Geta is killed, he's basically going to be essentially erased, literally, right? Damnatio memoriae. That's what the Romans called it. All right. Speaking of Caracalla, all right, so he's going to be important for, well, one big reason, I guess. 212, he issues what's called the Antonine Constitution. This grants Roman citizenship to everyone living in the borders of Rome. So now, literally everyone in the Roman Empire, at this point, is a citizen. What this also means is that being a Roman citizen doesn't quite come with the same prestige that it once did. So what we start to see happening is that the Romans, and this is happening even in law itself, distinguishing between two classes of citizens. Honestiores, or the kind of elevated ones, humiliores, the lower ones. So those of the kind of elite, right, the rich, the powerful, were honestiores, everyone else humiliores, right? And we would get things like different treatment under the law. So for the same crime, an honestiore might face exile, and humiliore execution, right? So everyone's a citizen, but you start to get kind of, well, two classes of citizen, okay? He is going to be succeeded by someone else who we're not talking about. Then we get Alexander Severus, his son. Rome faces significant military problems. In the east, we have a resurgent Persian Empire. The Parthians had been flagging a bit. Their power had been waning. A Persian family, the Sassanid family, is going to seize power, right? It's going to re-energize the empire that we now once again call the Persian Empire and push against Rome's eastern borders. Meanwhile, to the northeast, Germans are going to break through Roman lines. So basically, German invasion of Roman territories.
I.e., the Germanic tribes.
Yes. Alexander, facing two different problems, is essentially going to pay off the Germans so that he can go and fight the Persians. His army's not going to be too happy about this. They're going to mutiny. More about this in a second. And he will be assassinated,
Yikes.
bringing an end to the Severan dynasty. So this brings us to the crisis of the 3rd century. Why is this called the crisis of the 3rd century? Well, all right, so we're dealing with like a 50-year period. We see increased border pressure, right? So Rome is going to be pressured at its borders at a kind of a more intense rate than ever before, and actually people breaking through Roman borders, armies breaking through Roman borders, and attacking and sacking Roman territories, right? So the Sassanid Persian Empire and the Germans. And included among these Germans are groups or tribes that are going to become increasingly important, the Goths, right? We get the assassination of Alexander Severus, the kind of, I would say either apex, that's probably not right, the nadir of this from the Roman perspective of these border pressures and incursions is going to be the Emperor Valerian, who is fighting against the Persians and loses, and not only does he lose, he is going to get captured. Right? So this is kind of the low point, that a Roman emperor has been captured by a Persian king. Here's a monument from Persia itself, right? So we have King Shapur I here, one of the Sassanid kings. In front of him is a kneeling, kind of surrendering Roman. We don't know exactly, but we think this probably represents Valerian, right? Who is basically being captured by, or is submitting to the Persian king Shapur. All right. In addition, there's going to be an extreme financial crisis that's going to be exacerbated by all of these military pressures, right? On top of that, as the economy starts going down, people start hoarding all their money, which then creates a gold shortage, which is going to make things even worse. We get a series of internal revolts. Right? Where emperors will have irregular control over regions of the empire, right? So there'll be regions of the Roman Empire that are technically part of the Roman Empire that Roman emperors have no direct control over. And we get 18 emperors during this 50-year period. Average length of reign, 2.5 years per emperor. Only one of these 18, maybe, right, dies of natural causes. And even that is, he dies of the plague or some other epidemic.
When you say maybe, you mean like he may.
He might not have been. It says he dies of pestilence.
Oh.
We think that it's a plague or epidemic, but there's also some, maybe he was killed in some other way. So at most, 1 out of the 18 dies of natural causes. And even those are, I guess, not that natural, right?
Especially we consider assassinations among these emperors as well.
Right, so they're either going to be assassinated or die in battle. One of the two. All right. All right, so this brings us to our reading for today in Maximinus Thrax. What I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the primary source. So this is from Herodian, The History of the Roman Empire. He talks about Maximinus's rise to power, right? And the beginning of this so-called crisis of the 3rd century. Okay? Okay. So, how are we doing on the text? Do we want a second to review questions? Are people ready to talk about it? I'll take that as we might want to review for a little bit. Do we know anything about Maximinus Thrax? What do we know? Gabriella, what do we know?
He is they assassinated Alexander for him to be the emperor.
All right. Okay. So we talked about the troops' mutiny and assassinating Alexander Severus. We get a little bit more background, right? He pays off the Germans. The soldiers are unhappy with kind of his style of leadership. They want Maximinus. And why do they want him? Nicolette?
He's not really like an aristocratic family. He comes from France, and he's like lowborn.
Yes. Right. So it's not even remotely aristocratic, right? So that he is supposedly the first kind of lowborn person to become emperor, right? So I like him because of that. What else? Right.
I think this might answer the second thing, like how does Herodian describe or characterize Maximinus Thrax? So I was looking at the first passage 8,
Mm-hmm.
where Herodian was describing the origins of Maximus and his physical characteristics, his leadership abilities. For example, so again, going back to passage 8, where it says that they say that the boy he was a shepherd, but that in his youthful prime he was driving from the cavalry because of his size and strength. After a short time, favored by fortune, he advanced through all the ranks, rising eventually to the command of armies and the governing of provinces. There was not to finish, which I know above. I learned from Maximus in charge of recruits for the entire army. The second instruction in what they do is prepare them for war. And by carrying out his assignments thoroughly and diligently, I think one of the affection of the soldiers themselves.
Okay. So again, if you were going to put it in your own words, like 3 words, maybe. Why do the soldiers like him? Like, what is it about him? Yeah, Brian, what do you have?
And it's the fact that they carry out his assignments thoroughly and diligently.
Okay.
And that again, I mentioned in the passage that he's also one that has trained them, preparing them for war. So
Good.
He trained them most likely one by one, or not at the same time.
Okay, right. Cosmo, do you have something?
I was going to say that he said, he showed respect towards them and helped them in each Roman role. And
Okay.
why they were working.
So that's part of it, right? The teaching and respecting, right?
They liked his barbaric.
In what way did they like his barbaric ways?
Like they liked
Like-
that he had acts of cruelty.
Okay.
Which is very funny.
What about his manliness?
That's why.
Well, it'll be tied. It's tied to kind of the issue, right? It's not just that he was like. How did he get to his position? How did he get to his position?
Well, the soldiers, they were like growing tired of how Alexander, under his reign, his mother was basically controlling everything, or there was a lot of management of women. So they didn't like that. Like they didn't like there wasn't any like masculinity, anything there.
Right.
At first, Maximilian, he didn't really wanted to be emperor, but they threatened him, and then then later on, he brought those same troops to the Alexander's house. Yeah.
But how does he get to the position that the troops all like him and want him to be emperor? Go on.
because he trained all of the armies. He gave them gifts.
Right,
He showed each one like individually what to do,
right.
you know, how to do it, and.
But how did he get to the position where he was able to give them gifts? We're missing an important step.
He worked his way up.
He worked his way up through the army, right? And again, what does it say if you're going to work your way up from being basically drafted as you know, a low-level cavalry person to being a general in charge of the army? What does it kind of imply about him?
It says that you're a badass, basically.
Right. Okay. Right. I mean, again, he's someone who is talented, right? Who knows what he's doing.
This way until he earns a position in life.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And so again, it ties into the barbaric cruelty. You can see it can kind of lend itself to this a little bit too, right? This idea of kind of strength and power, you know, if it's wielded in an acceptable way.
Leading by example when he jumped into the marsh.
Right. Okay.
It
That's
shows
even when he's an
they were-
emperor a little bit later on, right? When he jumps into the marsh. So again, it's the idea that he starts off as lone-born, works his way up, right? He's respected by the troops, you know, because of his own skill, because of his interactions with them. They're dissatisfied with Alexander. Again, the kind of, it gets mentioned, the kind of the womanly influence, the kind of lack of progress on the military front, right? So we're going to go in the opposite. We're going to get a masculine, you know, kind of military guy, so to speak. Okay. What's he like as an emperor then? What's he like? Cosmo.
I would just say he's very humble. This is something that he didn't want, but he was doing it out of respect for the people that wanted his position.
At the beginning, I guess, maybe. I would say maybe not respect. What's the danger of the troops proclaiming yourself emperor? Of the troops proclaiming you emperor? What danger does it face?
That they could also replace you just as easily.
Well, one, yeah, they could also replace you. That could hurt to certainly happen.
They're loyal to him and not the state itself.
Okay, well, that might be a benefit though, right? Like, if someone basically declares that I'm emperor, who else is going to hear of this and react?
Oh, the current emperor.
The current emperor, who also has his own troops and army now. Maybe I've got enough troops that I'm going to win, right? But I mean, all of a sudden, if the troops start saluting you as emperor, you're in a dangerous position because there's no like coming back from that, right? There's no, I didn't mean it. So you got to kind of gauge the situation. It's like, all right, can I win, right? Am I willing to take the risk? Because it is a bit of a gamble, right? This is why we see also at the end the senator who's going to challenge him, Gordian, right? Also resists, right? The aristocratic youth show up and they basically convince him to be emperor at sword point. They're like, look, either you accept emperor and face whatever happens to you in the future, or we kill you now, right? So you can either die now, or you could, you know, possibly survive as emperor. Take your choice, right? So again, no guarantees, right? So it's a dangerous position to be in, which is why there's some reluctance. Okay, so some reluctance initially, but what's he like as an emperor? How does Herodian characterize him?
He starts saying that he's a bit cruel.
Mhm.
He starts showing his barbaric side because, like, he starts going after anybody that was, like, you know, friends or in favor of Alexander.
So first he like starts going after, starts killing anyone who was kind of connected with the old emperor. And it kind of takes it to the next level. Who does he start going after that?
Oh, the Germans. Yeah.
Okay, well he's going to fight against the Germans too, right? So that's part of it, is that he'll fight against the Germans, which is, I guess, perhaps viewed as a positive thing. And then kind of like in Rome.
The high-ranking officials.
Yeah, so then basically not just friends, but people of just of a higher status in general, right? That he'll start, you know, and again, Herodian kind of refers to this kind of like almost like as an inferiority or something, that he's like, you know, that they're high-level elite people, I'm from nothing, so I'm gonna get rid of them too. Okay? What else? What else was he like as an emperor, according to Herodian?
He was a tyrant.
How so?
He removed. Well, he removed, or him and his people removed the current emperor.
Mm-hmm.
They removed the thing, Alexander.
Right.
And I also mean tyrant as in like the modern context.
Yeah. So how so? How is he a tyrant in the modern?
So he basically killed a lot of people.
Right.
He killed friends of Alexander.
Right.
He didn't get sentenced from his palace. He ruled by fear. And he seized military power. He dismissed people from positions of power, and he would take it himself.
Right.
There was a plot that was formed against him, and against the emperor, persuading some of the soldiers to transfer the empire to his charge. The plot was said something like this: Maximus had bridged the Rhine River and was about to cross over and attack the Germans, or as soon as he got control of the empire, it's too long. Yeah, he was kind of an asshole.
So that was you're referring to here of possibly a rebellion against him, basically trying to trap him on the German side of the river so that he's going to die without support. Cosmo, what do you have?
I would say to add on to him, he was kind of dishonorable too, because when he finally defeated Alexander and took over, he sent centurions to kill him and his mother, which at that point there was really no reason to, as he was over.
Mm.
He lost it all.
Okay.
So he sounds similar to Sulla with the prescriptions list.
Ah, okay. What about the prescription list?
He kind of like had a desire to tell a lot of these troops to go out and kill these people to extract wealth.
Okay, right. So again, so kind of greedy for wealth starts to become part of it as well too, right? Well, why not just kill people, who are my opponents? Why not just, allow people to be killed just because they're rich and we can get their stuff? Nicolette.
It also seems that he was keeping this wealth for himself.
Yes.
It's like a very tyrannical thing to do.
A non-Augustus thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So again, emphasize, kind of greedy, obsessed with wealth. So we've hit on a lot of his weaknesses, right? Talks about him just kind of getting enraged, killing people without mercy, kind of stuff. What were his strengths as an emperor, according to Herodian?
I believe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name, Macedo.
Yes.
Macedo was like, expecting, I don't know, like a reward for like, snitching out that he was gonna conspire to kill him, but
Right.
instead, Maximus, he basically killed him as well.
Mhm.
So like in a way, he's honoring that. In a way, you think that you could have like be close to me,
Right.
but like,
But you sold out your friend to do it, right? I'm not going to trust you.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's maybe a positive thing. What else is positive now? Again, it's kind of why he becomes emperor in the first place, right? What is it, Nicolette?
He likes to deal with unpleasant things that typically one doesn't want to deal with.
Okay, such as?
Like to see to things of those who are unfortunate.
So he's going to handle problems.
Yes, like he handles problems that deal with the less fortunate of the area, and which is funny because then he turns around and steals from them, but
Yeah.
still, it seems that he's willing to appease them,
Okay,
unlike the other people who are in charge.
okay, good. Cosmo?
He rewarded those who served in the military with gifts and rations. That was-
Okay. So he's seen again as being kind of very supportive and taking care of the soldiers.
Those who revolt all sentences and all punishments.
Say that again?
I was referring to Maximus. When we wrote all sentences and punishments for the soldiers as well.
Mm-hmm. To get the soldiers on his side, right? I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, right? But yeah, but it speaks to this of like he's going to get the army on his side. Where does he have success, Gabrielle?
I was gonna talk about when he threw himself in the marsh.
Right. Okay, that's part of it, I think.
Yeah, because he keeps on like showing this like, I don't know, this idea of masculinity, like very beautiful.
Right. And in what context is this celebrated instead of maybe disdained? Like when is he successful at being kind of a violent masculine person? Doing what?
Fighting the Germans.
Fighting the Germans, right? So again, as kind of a warrior, as a general, as a military leader, right? He's viewed as being successful, right? And in fact, he says a line at the beginning of section 3 on page 9. He, after recounting everything, he says, "This is the kind of military man the emperor was." After talking about all these positive stuff, and his actions would have added to his reputation if he had not been too ruthless and severe towards his associates and his subjects. In other words, people would have really remembered him in this really positive way if he had kind of treated the people around him better, right? So, positive, good soldier, successful, heck, that's why he was made emperor in the first place, right? Bad, well, he basically treats his subjects horribly, he's killing them, doing all this kind of horrible stuff. Okay. Why do people turn against him? Kind of already talked about it, but
He's taking money from the treasury for himself.
right, yeah, all right. So again, it comes back to the greed. So the money from the treasury, and
He's taking money from his own subjects.
right. So again, it's coming back to the money and the property from the subjects, right? And so they're looking for an out, and they turn to Gordy. So it's his greed, it's going to be his downfall. Cosmo.
He was removing no people of high stature from positions. in
Yes.
government.
No, that's definitely part of it too, I think. And that's part of the idea why they seem to like Gordian, is because he's from kind of a traditional senatorial family. So, any other thoughts? So Maximinus, right? Thrax is basically the Latin word for Thracian. So basically, they call him Maximinus Thrax or Maximinus the Thracian. The blue arrow points to the area of Thrace, where he would have been from. The
Thank
red arrow is up where he killed where they killed Alexander, and where he was doing most of his fighting. Brian.
I was also gonna add, and that Maximus Thrax also and many men on site because of trivial charges.
Mm-hmm.
And so this mass arrest of his own subjects and or colleagues restore
Right.
resentment as well.
So again, right, that kind of excessively cruel, maybe treatment of the subjects is going to be one of his negatives. Absolutely. Okay, good. All right, so let's move on a little bit. So he, again, or his reign is kind of the beginning of the crisis of the 3rd century, and we'll set the tone. All right, now, during this crisis period, right, Christianity, as I mentioned, is pretty much an underground religion, right? It is, for the most part, illegal in the sense that it's, it's not outright illegal, but it's viewed as kind of problematic by Roman authorities, and there's going to be sporadic persecution of Christians, as we saw with Pliny. Okay. This being said, in the Christian tradition, the victims of this persecution, those who are killed for their Christian faith and not renouncing it, are going to be venerated as martyrs, are going to become an important part of the Christian tradition, right? Here we have someone, don't know if this is a Christian or not, right? This is a mosaic. So someone made artwork of a prisoner basically being attacked by a wild animal, one of the ways that prisoners, including Christians, were executed, right? Now, this being said, even though it was illegal and underground, right, we see evidence of Christians existing, and not only existing in somewhat semi-prominent positions, right? So that we have officials serving in the Roman government, soldiers, and members of the Familia Caesaris, right, the imperial bureaucracy, who are noted as like Christians on their tombstones, on their gravestones, right? So that Christians exist, some are prospering, right? But again, the whole idea seems to be Roman authorities are willing to kind of turn a blind eye, so long as everything is kind of kept at a low-key level. Okay? So that seems to be kind of the status quo. things change. So in the middle of this crisis is the 3rd century, 250 CE. One of these 18 emperors, Decius, implements a systematic, empire-wide persecution of the Christians. We're not really sure why, right? We don't get a great explanation for why he does this. But it's happening, again, at a level, like it's happening everywhere, and it's much more like Christianity must be eradicated, right? The guess is that perhaps like being scapegoated for, the kind of economic and military troubles that we just talked about, but we're not quite sure, right? Like why so much effort and attention is dedicated now, given all of this that was happening just before it. So anyways, there's going to be about 10 years of persecution. It starts to kind of trickle off near the end. Decius is going to die, right? The Emperor Gallienus in 260 actually issues an imperial edict of tolerance that basically, for all intents and purposes, legalizes Christianity, saying that it will be tolerated and not attacked by Roman authorities. Which brings us to Diocletian. So, Diocletian is going to represent the end of this crisis. So, the last of these kind of crisis emperors is a guy by the name of the Emperor Numerian. Diocletian was the head of the Praetorian Guard. So remember, the Praetorian Guard was kind of the part of the Roman army that was kind of tasked with imperial security. They were also very much at the center of all sorts of imperial administrations and coups. So he's the head of the Praetorian Guard and Numerian. Numerian's going to get killed. Despite the fact that his brother and co-emperor are still alive, the army is going to elevate Diocletian and acclaim him emperor. He's going to accept, fight against Numerian's brother, and defeat him, leaving him in charge of the Roman emperor. All right, so Diocletian recognizes the crisis that kind of Rome has been plagued with, and is going to enact several reforms in order to kind of address and try to repair the damage that's done. And he's going to end up taking Rome in somewhat of a new direction, right? So things are really going to start to change in important ways under Diocletian and his successors. The big one is that, again, he becomes emperor by himself. He is going to create something called the Tetrarchy, right? Tetrarchy meaning kind of 4 rulers. So, he basically co-opts one of his buddies, one of his army buddies, a guy by the name of Maximian, to serve as his co-emperor. Then they find 2 other military guys, who they also then adopt themselves, by the name of Galerius and Constantius Chlorus, to be their kind of junior emperors. So Maximian and Diocletian have the title Augustus. They're going to be like the 2 lead emperors. And then there will be Galerius and Constantius Chlorus, who are adopted by these 2. They're intended to be their successors. They are junior emperors called Caesars. Then Diocletian says at some point, the 2 senior emperors will step down, they will abdicate. The junior emperors will then be raised up to senior, to Augusti, right? And then they will find and adopt 2 new junior emperors. So going back to the tradition of the quote-unquote 5 good emperors, right? The idea of finding kind of qualified, established people who you're going to adopt and who are going to inherit the position in order to theoretically bring some stability. Okay? All right. Here we have an image of the Tetrarchs, which interestingly now is actually located on the roof of St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. What do you notice here about the statue? What do you notice? What?
They're hugging.
They're hugging, yeah, sort of, or embracing.
Sort of.
What is that communicating?
A sense of like camaraderie.
Camaraderie, brotherhood, togetherness, right?
It could also serve as like, say, a goodbye, maybe of sorts.
Divine?
No, sorry, goodbye. I mean, goodbye.
Oh, goodbye. Not so much goodbye, I think, at this point. I think it's more like togetherness, unity. Therefore is one, right? And the idea, this is my last point, and I'll end here, right, is that they're going to divide and conquer. Diocletian says, well, part of the problem is that the emperor can't be everywhere. So now if you have 4 emperors, you can essentially divide up the Roman Empire. You can see where their all kind of home bases are, and work together to kind of more micromanage the region. That if a problem flares up, you're going to have an emperor nearby who can respond to it.
Were they fearful of each other? In a sense, because I see them like obtaining like a sword and they're clutching it. So
Not that I'm aware of, or at least not that makes the record at first.
Over this strategy of divide and conquer, it didn't exactly work well for at least one of them.
For many, it's not gonna work out as well as planned, perhaps. Anyway, so we'll end it here, and we'll pick up with this and finish this on Wednesday. Okay.